This Remembrance Sunday, as with every Remembrance Day since 2010, I remember Petty Officer Craig Blake. I assisted in placing his flag-draped body on the armored fighting vehicle that carried him to his ramp ceremony in Kandahar airfield. Ramp ceremonies were held on the tarmac of the airfield to load the bodies of fallen soldiers onto the aircraft that would take them on their final flight home. Allow me, if you will, to read an excerpt from an email that I wrote home early in my tour of duty in Afghanistan. This email was later published as the prologue to a book titled Highway of Heroes by the photojournalist Pete Fisher. This morning, the most sobering event in my life took place as we said goodbye to Petty Officer Craig Blake on the tarmac of Kandahar airfield. I didn't know him. He arrived here just about a week before I did. While we came here prepared to face tragedy and loss, nothing can truly prepare you for the sobering reality of holding your salute with 1,000 brothers in arms as the body of our fallen begins his final journey home. I emerged from my tent 5 o'clock this morning into a thick soup of what can best be described as a viscous fog mixed with dust. It's something you probably have difficulty imagining. There was a dust storm last night, as we frequently experience here, which then mixed with a thick fog, and it seemed that the moisture particles bound to the dust particles and kept them afloat. At the end of the ceremony, our berets, our eyebrows, our eyelashes, our hair, it was all frosted with dust. And if one didn't know better to see it, they might have thought that we were all frozen in place and time. This cloud insulated the ramp ceremony, making it feel surreal. No outside sound penetrated, and from where I stood at the side of the armored vehicle, which carried Petty Officer Blake's body, only the open tail of the Hercules aircraft could be seen on the other side of the formed body of Canadian, American, British, Australian, and Slovakian troops, the body of the aircraft disappearing into the cloud. It was quite an insular ceremony. As the boots of 1,000 soldiers marched on, I felt privileged to be part of this national and even international tribute to a fallen Canadian. Yes, there was a swell of emotion as we held our salute to our fallen brother, making his way feet first onto the aircraft, arriving the way he had departed. And I thought about the caution that I received before going out onto the tarmac from a Master Corporal Lee. He said to me, "Whatever you start to feel out there, lock it away. We can't afford to get emotional here. There will be plenty of time for that when we get home." As I type this now, I can feel the cold steel of the transfer case, the weight of the handle pressing into my palm. But we have more to carry now. The torch of Petty Officer Craig Blake. We cannot stop to feel the emotion fully here yet, because his work must carry on through us who remain. God rest his soul, and may we never forget. Petty Officer Craig Blake died when an improvised explosive device detonated southwest of Kandahar City in Panjwai district on May 3rd, 2010. Aged 37 years, he left behind a wife and 2 children. 10 of my comrades fell in combat operations during my 8-month deployment, including Trooper Larry Rudd, age 26, whose flag-draped transfer case I also assisted in carrying to his ramp ceremony. A total of 158 Canadian soldiers died in the Afghan mission. Canada's combat mission in Afghanistan ended in 2011, shortly after I left. And in 2021, along with the more than 40,000 Canadians who served in Afghanistan, I watched in horror as our friends, the Americans, so suddenly and disastrously withdrew from the country, allowing the Taliban to quickly regain control. I was devastated. I questioned, to what end had I served there? To what end did Canada give of her talent, give of her treasure, and most importantly, give her 158 sons and daughters? With time, I have regained some perspective. I am only one person. I cannot control the outcomes of geopolitical machinations and the current reordering of global power. What I do know, when I put my head on my pillow at the end of the day, is the very real difference that I helped to make in the lives of women and girls in an 8-month period of time in 2010. When I first arrived, the schools were closed. There were few vendors in the streets, in the markets. In the streets, there were only what we referred to as fighting-aged males. After several clearing operations to dislodge the Taliban from Panjwai district, the schools reopened. The markets were again bustling and full, and women and girls ran alongside our convoy, waving with both arms at us and smiling. And this is the picture of Afghanistan that I hold dear in my memory today. Afghanistan was just one conflict that claimed the lives of Canadians. 516 Canadian soldiers were killed in the Korean War, over 45,000 in the Second World War, and more than 66,000 in the First World War. And from the numbers I have just cited, those were only from among our men and women in uniform, whereas throughout these conflicts, millions of civilians have also died through direct attack, through disease brought on by malnutrition, and in some cases, even by genocide. They call out with Job, "Oh, that my words were written down. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book." This life is transitory and fleeting, and nothing highlights this more than the death and decay and destruction of war. And so we remember. We remember the young men and the young women who grew not old, while we who are left grow old. We remember the boys and the girls who were left fatherless and motherless. We remember those from our very own congregation, whose names you heard, those like Gunner Charles McMullen. Their names are inscribed on the World War I memorial plaque right here in Metropolitan United Church. Aged just 32 years, McMullen left behind a wife and a little girl of just 1.5 years of age. He was killed May 11th, 1917. And there were others. You heard their names, but I encourage you to stop by their memorial plaque on the wall and read their names for yourself and remember. Why do we remember? Why must we remember? We remember not to glorify the dead, not to celebrate the victories achieved on the battlefield, not to commemorate the very triumphs of war that forged this great country as an independent nation. No. We remember that war robs from us the lives of young men and young women, that it leaves children motherless and fatherless. We remember so that we can learn from the horrors of war and together work to build a lasting peace. Remembrance is not for the dead. Remembrance is for the living. The memorial plaque with the name of Gunner Charles McMullen is not the only memorial of remembrance that we've installed in these hallowed walls. On September 9th, 1923, on a window near the east transept, was dedicated by the Reverend Dr. G.H. Williams to the 36 members of this congregation who died in the First World War. It was unveiled by Lieutenant Colonel A.H. Borden. The window depicts David and the mighty men, King David, angels, soldiers, the Dominion coat of arms and the royal coat of arms. Inscribed in a panel near the bottom are these words: "Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give unto you a crown of life." I am reminded of the words of Job when he said, "After my skin has been destroyed, then in my flesh I shall see God." Job knew that his Redeemer, his Vindicator, lives. In Israel, a Redeemer was usually the nearest kinsman who was obligated to exact vengeance in a blood feud. And we see this same word used in the reading that we heard today from the book of Psalm, chapter 98, which said, "The Lord has made known his victory. He has revealed his vindication in the sight of the nations." Job cried out, "Oh, that my words were written down. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book," not because he longed to be remembered, but because the testing of Job had led to his ostracism, his alienation, his estrangement from all human relationships. He had been denied the normal convention of courtesy and the anticipated response of love from his friends who wrongly assumed that he had somehow brought the situation upon himself. Yet he was so certain that his vindication would be brought about by his Redeemer that he wanted his words written and recorded for future generations to read and to know that justice prevails. Doesn't it feel like this world needs some justice today? I invite you to think now of those who, like Job, need vindication, who need redemption, or maybe, like Job, are just asking for a little courtesy and the anticipated response of love from friends when they're going through difficult times. Job was certain that justice would prevail in the end. He was so certain that nothing, not even the decay and destruction of death, would stand in the way. He proclaims that after my skin has been destroyed, then in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see on my side. God, my Redeemer, is on my side. God's covenant with us, a covenant of redemption, cannot be extinguished by death. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that if I am faithful, even unto death, after my skin has been destroyed, I will remain a beloved child of God. In our gospel reading today, some Sadducees, a group that rejected the idea of the resurrection and the afterlife, devised a clever trap for Jesus. If there are 7 brothers and the first marries a woman and then dies childless, and then the next marries her and dies childless, and the next, and so on and so on, in the resurrection, they asked Jesus, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had married her. It's a thought-provoking question, right? No, says Jesus, it is a pointless question. Jesus argues that God's covenant is meaningless if it is canceled by death. Our God is not the God of the dead, but the God of the living. To debate whether there is a literal resurrection misses the point. As we recite weekly in a new creed, in life, in death, in life beyond death, God is with us. We are not alone. Thanks be to God. Our Redeemer, our Vindicator, lives, and his covenant cannot be canceled by death. Remembrance is for the living. I was recently in New York City and I ducked into a church to pray. It's something I like to do whenever I'm traveling and I have a few spare minutes and the opportunity. This church was St. Paul's Chapel. It is the oldest surviving church in New York City. It was just 100 meters from the base of the World Trade Centers. It miraculously survived the attacks of 9/11 and became a place of refuge. Inside, I found this prayer card that speaks to me now as I prepare to deploy once again. As you may have heard, I will board a flight this week and join Operation Reassurance, the Canadian Armed Forces' largest current overseas mission aimed at supporting NATO deterrence and defense measures in Central and Eastern Europe. Now, as I've said, I am under no illusions that I can control the outcomes of geopolitical machinations and the current reordering of global power. What I do know is that I am not alone, that I stand shoulder to shoulder with my colleagues in collective defense, and that together we can work to build a lasting peace. Remembrance is for the living. So what can we, the living, do? While some must serve in uniform far away, all of us can serve right here at home. What can we do even this week in our own lives to contribute to a lasting peace? Who do we know that is crying out for justice, for vindication? Who do we see, perhaps even right here in Toronto, that are ostracized, that are alienated, that are estranged? Have we, like the friends of Job, allowed ourselves to assume wrongly that they have somehow brought the situation upon themselves? All they are asking for is a little courtesy and the anticipated response of love from friends when they are going through difficult times. Can we afford them that love? What can we do in our lives today to contribute to a lasting peace? Remembrance is not for the dead. Remembrance is for the living. I would like to close now with this prayer from St. Paul's Chapel. O God, who has put into the hearts of people a great longing for peace, but has also given the power to choose, grant us the will to make our choices in accordance with your will. Bind the world together, O God, in fellowship, in service, and in love, and grant that we may take part in the fulfillment of your purpose. So may it be.